Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get
Drivers
into
with
it.
experience are familiar with the problems that can arise when trying to start a car that has been idle for a month or a year. However, for beginners who are not burdened with such knowledge, their lack of knowledge can cause that at the right moment they risk being left without a vehicle. As a matter of fact, knowledge of how to start the car after a sufficiently long idle time is the necessary minimum that determines the culture of driving. Therefore, it makes sense to cover this issue with the utmost care, paying attention to all the nuances that can hinder the successful start of the power unit, which has been idle for a long time. What to do to start the engine after long-term parking. It should be noted that the set of measures related to the preparation of the vehicle for operation after downtime depends largely on its duration. It is clear that a few weeks are unlikely to affect the ability to start the engine, but in case of downtime of 6 months or more, many units and systems of the vehicle need to be thoroughly checked. Otherwise, you may encounter quite serious problems affecting the performance and life of the power unit. That is why it is so necessary to know what to pay special attention to when starting the car after a long, especially multi-year downtime. Oil, even factory-packaged engine oil, is not eternal. Lubricant, poured into the engine, is not without reason considered a consumable material. It must be periodically changed as it becomes contaminated and loses its original performance characteristics. Prolonged downtime negatively affects this technical fluid no less than in case of intensive work of the engine. The fact is that oil as a complex substance has the property to delaminate, especially at rest. At the same time, there is a process of settling of additives, which has an extremely negative impact on the properties of the oil. That is why it is recommended to drain the lubricating fluid when preparing for prolonged parking. How to start the car after a long idle time? If for some reason the oil has not been drained, the answer is quite elementary. We drain the used fluid and flush the lubrication system. This step could have been avoided if we had performed this procedure before the car was preserved, after which we can pour in new with mandatory replacement of the oil filter. Fuel gasoline, as well as diesel fuel, is practically not subject to delamination, but there are nuances here as well. The fact is that during very long idling in the garage, and especially in a city open parking lot, condensation may form in the gas tank. The reason for this phenomenon is temperature fluctuations. Of course, they take place during intensive operation of the vehicle. However, in this case, the consequences are not so tangible, since fuel is quickly consumed and the gas tank is replenished with a new portion. In a car immobilized for months, the concentration of moisture as a result of condensation processes can reach significant values, which will certainly affect the quality of the fuel mixture during the start of the power unit. Therefore, in order to start a long-standing car, it is recommended to leave the gas tank almost completely filled. In this case, less condensation will be formed. If the car has been parked for several years and the tank was filled very poorly, it is recommended to drain it completely and pour in quality fuel. Battery, even inexperienced car owners know that if the car is driven relatively infrequently in winter, the battery should be removed and placed in a heated room. As a last resort, it is recommended to remove the positive terminal. If this is not done, 5 to 6 months of idle time is enough for the battery to be completely or almost completely discharged. If the car has been immobilized for more than a year, the chances of successfully carrying out resuscitation measures are rapidly decreasing to zero. There is an opinion that on a serviceable car battery can stand for any length of time without any consequences for it. This is, of course, a big misconception. There are always leaks, however imperceptible. Moreover, even a battery completely disconnected from the onboard network also sits down over time. And if it is not new, this process can lead to irreversible consequences. So, the first thing to do before starting a car that has been idle for a year or more is to try to charge the battery using a quality charger. We should immediately note that the chances of success are slim, especially for aging batteries. 4 to 5-year-old batteries are considered to be such. In some cases, topping up the electrolyte may help, but it is recommended to do it yourself only with the use of a device that measures its density. It must correspond to a certain value. If this does not help, the battery should be replaced with a new one. Note that this is one of the most common problems with prolonged downtime of any vehicle. Read also, how to eliminate scratches on the glass of the car. Expert advice. Spark plugs. A modern car is literally stuffed with electronics. There are more than 24 sensors alone, and all this equipment is connected by many hundreds of meters of wiring. If the car has been for a long time without movement in garage conditions or on the street near garbage cans, it cannot be excluded that rodents have not spoiled the integrity of the wires. The presence of mice may be indicated by droppings left by rodents under the hood or directly under the machine. They cannot spoil spark plugs, but they should also be checked, having previously unscrewed them. As a rule, long parking does not affect their appearance, except for rust on metal parts, but it is still highly recommended to clean them thoroughly. And even better, install a set of new plugs, especially if the car has been immobilized for more than a year. In this case, you will make it a little easier to find the reasons why the engine does not start. Sealing rubbers. Of particular note is the need to check the condition of the sealing rubbers. The fact is that usually one side of them is constantly in contact with engine oil, which is not aggressive to the rubber. But with even a short standing, the lubricating fluid flows into the sump, and the gaskets and oil seals are completely drained. If they are in this state for a long time, under the influence of air and temperature differences, they begin to deteriorate. Cracks are formed, causing the seals to lose their tightness. It practically does not affect the engine starting directly, but it is highly recommended to look under the hood after it's warming up and make sure that there are no engine oil leaks. Otherwise, the power unit may start to experience oil starvation, which can have serious consequences. Hoses. Exactly the same kind of problems arise with rubber hoses, which are also enough in the car. With prolonged parking, they, like gaskets, lose their original properties and become covered with microcracks. At the moment of starting the car, it may not appear, but in the future, leakage of technical fluids is fraught with great trouble, whether it is engine oil, coolant, brake fluid, or fuel. Therefore, before starting the car after a long idle time, it is necessary to inspect the hoses very carefully for external defects. If the car has been idle for 4 or more years, all hoses should be replaced with new ones. Such a long downtime is detrimental to rubber products. Brake fluid. The characteristics of this technical fluid initially assume the presence of high hygroscopicity, i.e., the property of good absorption of moisture. Even if the vehicle is operated without downtime, it is recommended to replace the fluid every few years. After prolonged parking, such a procedure is simply necessary because in this case the concentration of water in the brake fluid may be critical. Since it circulates through the circuit, which is exposed to high temperatures during intensive braking, the fluid diluted with water can boil, creating a plug that prevents normal flow. This threatens to cause complete brake failure, with the potential for an accident. Brake discs/pads. Corrosion is a common occurrence for brake discs. If the car is not idle, this process is prevented by exposure of the pads during braking. After prolonged parking, the rust layer can be significant, so a short trip with heavy braking is recommended to help get rid of corrosion marks. If this is not done, you run the risk of encountering difficulties when you need to brake suddenly. No less attention should be paid to the brake pads, which under the influence of external factors may delaminate from the base, which is unacceptable. The bad thing is that such a defect is not always detected during external inspection, so a preparatory trip is necessary even in this case. When idling for more than 3 years, it is definitely necessary to replace the TCs with new ones. How to start the engine after a long idle period. Features of starting the engine after idle time are determined by its duration. Let's consider the most typical cases. Parking for less than a month. If the car is new or in proper technical condition, there should be no problems with starting the power unit. In most cases, the main reason for unsuccessful starts is the discharge of the battery, especially if the case occurs in winter. At frosts of about 15 degrees, lasting a week or more, complete discharge of the battery is guaranteed. In summer, such a short period of parking should not affect the properties of the battery, although in this case, too, current leaks are present, but on a small scale. Symptoms indicating complete or significant discharge of the battery. If the lights on the dashboard when the ignition is switched on do not light up. If an attempt to start the engine is accompanied by a clicking noise and the starter does not turn when the starter manages to make a few slow revolutions of the crankshaft, after which everything goes quiet. Read also, noise insulation of the engine compartment of the car and its engine. In such cases, you should simply charge the battery. And if there is no such possibility, ask another driver to give a cigarette lighter. This procedure requires the presence of special starting wires and knowledge of the order in which to produce it. In the case of MKPP, you can try to start the car with a pusher. This is one of the most common options. Note that on cars with a diesel power unit for this will require much more effort, and not every such car can be started without consequences, using muscle power. Downtime of the car for several months. In such cases, the algorithm of actions is as follows. Check the condition of the battery terminals. Starter and mass. The presence of oxides significantly reduce the probability of a successful start, so such defects must be eliminated. Fully charge the battery. Check and coolant levels. If the car was parked in an open parking lot, there is a probability of oxidation of ignition coil and trampler contacts. If so, they should be cleaned, including from soot, in carbureted cars in the warm season. Fuel from the float chamber during idle time escapes and evaporates, so pump the fuel pump manually before starting the power unit. If this does not help, you can try to pour about 20 grams of gasoline into the float chamber. If the ignition is in good working order, this volume is enough for the engine to start. Injector cars are not characterized by such problems. The main thing is that the fuel return valve is in working condition. In this case, the gasoline pump will create the necessary pressure to successfully start the engine. On cars with diesel power unit, the fuel system may become strangled as a result of prolonged idle time. It is possible to remove the air using a special device for manual pumping, but it is not present on all models. On many diesel cars, there is a special valve to solve this problem. If all of the above preparatory operations did not yield results, you should look for a malfunction that does not allow you to start the engine. Starting the engine of a car put into preservation as a rule. This operation is resorted to if the expected downtime exceeds 1 year. In such cases, starting the engine is always a very responsible procedure, often resulting in failure. To minimize the probability of such an outcome, you should adhere to the following recommendations. Charge the battery, connect it. Make sure that the terminals are connected securely. Make sure that the fuel system is working properly. Most often, if the car was parked on an open area, moisture gets into the fuel tank. You can get rid of it by draining the old fuel and pouring in new fuel. Usually there is a drain plug in the gas tank for this purpose. In winter, it can be quite effective to pour 200 to 300 g of ethyl alcohol into the tank and then refueling to a full tank. In this case, the alcohol, mixed with water, burns in the cylinders as ordinary fuel. For carburetor cars, manual pumping of fuel with a gasoline pump is carried out. In diesel power units, a pair is used for this purpose. Obligatory procedure. Check the level of technical fluids. Deficiency of fuel oil is acceptable. The engine will start, but it is inadmissible to start the engine without oil. Filling should be done with the same lubricant that is present in the engine. Mixing of oils is inadmissible. The next step is to check the condition and clean the timing contacts. It is advisable to change the plugs for new ones after very long idle times. Another problem, especially in the case of engines with a high mileage, is gumming of the piston rings. You can unclog them using a few common simple techniques. It is also necessary to check the condition of pipes and pipes. After such a long period of inactivity, they may crack, losing tightness. Nuances of starting the engine in winter after a long idle time. In general, the procedure for preparing the car to start is similar to the above described, except for some details. Let's describe the algorithm of this operation. Pump up the fuel with the accelerator pedal or manually for carburetor models. Turn on the ignition and pause for a few seconds. Turn on the starter for no more than 8 to 10 seconds if the attempt was unsuccessful. Repeat the operation with a 2-minute interval. To facilitate the start of the engine on the car with MKPPU can by depressing the clutch pedal. It should be released only after the engine has warmed up, when a stable mode of operation is achieved, if the power unit works jerkily. Repeat the procedure from the beginning. After the engine warms up, inspect the car for leaks. If there are any, the engine is shut down and the leak is eliminated. In severe frost, the engine should be warmed up at minimum revolutions, and the engine should be started without heavy loads. In conclusion, starting a long idle car may seem daunting, but by following these simple steps, you can get your vehicle back on the road safely and efficiently. Remember to check the battery, inspect the fuel system, and ensure all fluids are at the proper levels before attempting to start the engine. If you encounter any issues, don't hesitate to seek professional help. With a little patience and care, you can revive your car and enjoy the drive once again. Thank you for watching, and safe travels.